Hey there, greetings fellow insomniacs, it's your friend and fright, good old Chunky Larry, and we are getting ready to have a conversation with director Karl Redgen, and you're going to find out all about him in a couple of minutes. But before we get going, I have to do a little bit of housekeeping just so you know what you're walking into. So, I had this conversation with Karl, and for whatever reason, maybe it was just holiday malaise or whatever, I had some very strong technical issues. So, unfortunately, this episode will be audio only. So you're going to be looking at the image, the thumbnail for the episode the entire time. And I apologize for that in advance. Sometimes things are just out of my control. And all I can do is be forthcoming and let you know what you're walking into. But it is a really solid conversation. We get to find out about him, his inspirations, and what he's got planned for the future. So I definitely recommend you sitting and giving it a listen. If you don't want to sit and watch, just some screen on YouTube, you can absolutely listen to the audio version of it on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify. It is available in all of those places. But this episode is going to be brought to you by a couple of different people, and if people are nice to me, I try to pay it forward and let other people know about these places. First place is boxesformama.com. Now, Ryan doesn't know that I'm doing this, but it is absolutely one of those things that I feel is imperative if we're going to spread the love of the horror genre. And so Boxes for Mama is a mom and pop organization that create these blind box rentals, and it's a very fun and cool kind of thing that you can do. If you're a physical media collector, it's a surprise every time, and he also includes snacks and little trinkets. He creates a movie night for you, and it's a surprise whatever it is, and you're essentially rolling the dice. But Ryan's got really good taste, so you're always going to get something that is worth a shit. And so you go to boxesformama.com. That is the way that you're going to be able to find out more about that. Let them know Chunky sent you. There's no promo code for that, but there is a promo code for Sinister Brew Coffee. Sinister Brew Coffee is the forefront and horror coffee, and that just sounds fucking like it's right up my alley. Personally, I fucking love their spice nog. It is a delicious treat this time of the holidays when you're kind of sick of your family and you're ready to just watch some horror movies and drink something strong. This is for you. And if you go to sinisterbrewcoffee.com, use the promo code CreaturePod10, you can save 10% on your order for anything that you get. And they have all kinds of stuff. They have coffee mugs, they have the little Keurig pods, they have coffee, obviously. I mean, what would a coffee company be without coffee? And they've got almost every flavor you can imagine. They are constantly coming up with new ones. Go to sinisterbrewcoffee.com, use the promo code CreaturePod10, save yourself 10%. This is also going to be brought to you by my friends over at Miami Fox Streaming. And over on Miami Fox Streaming, you can watch a show called Creature Features Curations. And if that sounds familiar, it's because your boy, good old Chunky Larry, is watching horror films and discussing them. And it's like you get to sit with me and watch a horror film. It's really fucking cool. We're 2 episodes deep on the show as of this recording, but the 3rd is coming out this month. We are going to be covering Christmas Evil. So, by all means, subscribe to Miami Fox Streaming. Use the promo code CreaturePod. Save yourself 15% over there on subscription. And subscribe for a year. You're saving 15%, might as fucking well. Then you get to watch all of the Creature Features curations as they come out. And I've got a lot of really cool ideas for that. So that's me greedily self-promoting while promoting someone else. The last but certainly not least is the Atrium Horror Film Fest. They are a film festival that specializes in short films, feature-length films, video shorts, and they want to get all of the world of sci-fi and horror under one umbrella and foster the future. And that's what this whole episode is about, that we're about to have. I am talking to one of the filmmakers from the Atrium Horror Film Festival, and it's a really cool conversation, and it's always really exciting to see the future of the horror genre in front of your very eyes. If you feel that you're in the future of horror, you can also contribute one of your films, your short film, your feature-length film, or your video short to the Atrium Film Festival. And I have to do some reading right now, so I'm going to read the website to you right now. It's filmfreeway.com/Atrium Horror Film Fest. And that is where you can apply, submit your film, and potentially have it seen by all kinds of horror fans around the world. And if you're any kind of aspiring horror filmmaker, that seems like the dream, is having your film seen. And so go look into it, let them know Chunky sent you. But now that I've gotten all of the hubbub and talking and all the nonsense and tomfuckery out of the way, we are going to get into this conversation, and I cannot wait for you to listen. And I'll see you around, and listen to someone you trust or whatever. But you don't need to hear me say that now. You'll hear me say that later on. But sit back, relax, and enjoy this interview with Karl Redgen on the Creature Features podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Here we go. Greetings, fellow insomniacs, and welcome to another episode of the Creature Features podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. I, of course, am your host. My name is Chunky Larry, and very often I get to talk to the people that made things that meant a lot to the past. And sometimes I get the opportunity to speak to the future or potential future. And that is one of the opportunities that I have today. I am talking with a very up-and-coming filmmaker who is right now kind of in the world of short films, and we're going to talk about a couple of the short films that he has worked on and look towards the future and his future specifically and what he has in mind for the horror genre. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce to you a writer, a director, and just general good bloke. And I'll explain why I say bloke in just a second. Mr. Karl Redgen, how are you doing, man?
I'm good, really good. I am Australian, as it will be made clear. But I have just moved to America, so I just had my Thanksgiving, and so thanks for welcoming me to your country.
So is this your first Thanksgiving?
Oh no, I was here last year, so I was here for 6 months and touring, going to the film festivals and meeting people, and then I'm now back, and I'm here permanently now. So I was kind of here for 6 months on a tourist visa, and now I live here. So
very cool, very cool. So let's talk about your inspirations, because that's the beginning of any story, is the kernel of, like, this is something I enjoy, to getting to this is something I think I can do. And let's start with, what was the first thing that really kind of gravitated towards you and said to you, I think I can do this?
Well, it's interesting. So when I was in high school, I knew I wanted to do film. I tried to do all the subjects that I could do to do film, so media, photography, even I was doing business. And so early on in like the early days of becoming a filmmaker, I think they so films like Clerks. So
Hmm.
Kevin Smith was a big influence for me, and say something like Mallrats. So I had Clerks on VHS. I used to play so much that I wound out the tape. And so, but then Mallrats was another film that was something that he went from a movie that he just shot with black and white film with his buddies to actually having studio money. And I went, okay, I know that this is the 90s and I'm kind of a bit younger than that. So this is like early 2000s for me.
Mm.
And I kind of figured, well, I think that's sort of the option for me to get into film. And what that did is it made me sort of follow that kind of 90s indies scene. And so watching movies like um, Desperado and El Mariachi, and just reading all those books about trying to how we can make indie films, even Quentin Tarantino, and how we got the funding for stuff like Reservoir Dogs. But for me, the film that really made me go, I want to be a director, I want to be a filmmaker, would probably be Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I think
Amazing
that
pick.
kind of showed a new way of how to how to make sci-fi, but on a shorter scale. And I went to the cinema. It was like 1 in the afternoon. I was the only one in the movie theater. It finished playing. I ran out and I talked to the janitor and I said, "How good is that movie?" And he said, "I don't know, man. I just cleaned the place."
And so I know because I have a couple of friends that live in Australia, and I know that you guys are kind of cut off from the rest of the world. And with the advent of the internet being what it is, it's not as cut off anymore. So in the early 80s,
Hmm.
when it was, a little bit more of that, there were films like obviously the Mad Max films and Turkey Shoot and The Long Weekend or Patrick that really kind of like grabbed the attention
Hmm.
of US audiences. But now more so, you see things like Talk to Me, where it's Australian influence and that kind of
Hmm.
culture dynamic that allows us to get a glimpse into the world. And this is just speculation, obviously, but I have to assume that, and you had mentioned that Clerks is and Mallrats are kind of your inspiration, kind of jumping points.
Hmm.
Was there anything culturally in terms of Australian cinema that was like really kind of gravitating towards you?
Yeah, and so in those early days, I was getting VHSs from the video store, and they had a small Australian section. Like you're saying, we had a massive horror movement in the 80s and a massive like kind of do it yourself, grab a camera, shoot movies. And so there was a couple. One of them was a movie called Razorback. I don't know if you
Yes,
ever saw.
yes.
So that was like, so what used to happen is my sister is much older than I am, and she would go to the video store and just rent movies without even looking at the age restrictions. So she'd rent movies like The Godfather or Human Traffic or Train Spotting. And I'm like 12 years old and obviously not really allowed to be watching these movies.
But that's the
Um,
good, that's the sweet spot, man.
you would have seen it, but the movie that really kind of started that whole film and that for me as well, there was like, man, I would love to have made that is Wake and Fry.
I have
Um,
not seen that.
when
That's
I had
going
that
on the
borrowed
list.
it on VHS. I haven't pre it predated Mad Max, and it's that kind of alcoholics and yahoos, as we call it, the loudmouth Australians, and it was a cool era for me because it meant that it goes with stuff like Clerks as well, where sister would just go to the video store because she was 10 years older than I am. So when I was 13, she was 23. And she's like, "Oh, you'd love this movie." And then one day, I'm in my room watching Boogie Nights, and my mum knocks on the door and says, "You better not be watching Boogie Nights."
There's a couple of films that I was able to watch of your work in kind of preparation for this conversation. Two of your short films. One was Outer Reaches, and the other was Short or Closed Circuit. I almost said Short Circuit. Um, I noticed some parallels and elements that kind of exist in both films, and one of the primary elements that I think is most noticeable in your work is this feeling of isolation Now, is that from a place where you feel kind of ostracized for what it is that you love, or what is the motivation behind the lead characters in your writing to feel kind of claustrophobically ostracized?
It was a mining town. If you've ever lived in a country town, you get the idea that it's filled with, people who aren't sort of artists or aren't we're always considered the freaks or the outsiders. And
Mm-hmm.
so in my high school, I was the only alternative kid. I had a mohawk. I wore a leather jacket. I listened to punk and hardcore. So rather than playing sports or doing the things that like the popular kids were doing, I would go into the dark room. When I was 13, 14, kind of growing up in that time, I was one of the only kids that had a Final Cut Pro account. So people would come over and I would edit the skateboard videos, or I would be like, I wouldn't do the sport, but I would like film stuff, and I would have gigs at my house. So I played in a band and we played like punk hard stuff, and so that kind of merely played on that sort of writing. And a lot of my work, even sort of earlier stuff that I was doing just with a handy cam, the mini DV discs, was always about that isolation and kind of feeling like you didn't belong. And I think that's sort of carried on in my, my adult life and making films. My brother kind of laughs because every time I give him a script to read, it's always some depressed man, lonely, kind of isolated from the rest of the world.
Sad Man Alone films. Maybe that's the next production company is
Lonely
Sad
Trilly.
Man Alone.
Like, and it's just always a single man, just always on his own, fighting the man.
So with Outer Reaches is just a atmospheric film that really plays with the frame, and it feels like a calling card piece in a sense that it's kind of saying this is the kind of stuff I can do. Is that how you feel about it? And what were your
Right.
motivations for Outer Reaches in terms of what it was that you were trying to convey? So if before you answer that, I could just kind of give you my observation, and then you can tell me how far from the mark I am. The lead character, is this man who's devoted his life to his job, and it's when he's confronted with the reality of losing what's actually important to him that he understands why it's important. Because that was kind of the takeaway that I had from Outer Reaches, and I don't necessarily get that with Closed Circuit, but I definitely got that in Outer Reaches. Is that far from the path of what you were trying to say?
Oh no, it's right on the money. Is the interesting thing about Outer Reaches, and it kind of plays on the filmmaking side as well, is that this was sort of my first big project. I've worked on other things before. I've been an AD for a lot of years, working on with other directors and writers, but I wanted to do something on my own and thought that I would go out on my first major project with all guns blazing.
Mm-hmm.
And so put all of my money in, siphoned my bank accounts, and called up all of my friends, my producer and my production designer, and we said, let's make this film, and make it about the really the hard work that we put in. And so when
Mm-hmm.
I was working with the actor, as you were saying, it was about him devoting his entire life for this mission, growing up without his kid. His kid was born before he even left, so he hadn't even met his son yet. Knowing that he is going to a new planet to find a hope for humanity. And so in the end, when he has to make that choice that's been like a thrust upon him, he needs to decide, is my internal obligations, my wife, my job, my company that I work for, my son that I haven't met, is it bigger than my own dedication to saving the rest of the world, saving the universe? Literally on my notes pad, I wrote him as a fate worse than death. So, what is a fate worse than death? In this case, he's stranded on this planet by himself, and he'll probably die losing everything that he loves.
with with that
Lost.
that being kind of the launching point of what you're trying to say, do you find that
Mhm.
that having that as your launching point, that it's more important to say without saying, because I feel like it could be done expositorily through dialogue, but I think that just visually telling that story is the better play, and that's obviously the way that you go with it, especially when you're making a
Mm.
short film. You don't have a lot of time to really hammer those ideals home. So again, having the image available on the screen for him to see, you have to assume that, and this is just kind of visual storytelling, that he's looked at that a lot, and that it gets pulled up because it's readily available.
Burns it. So it's all this thing of internal manipulation. The ship has full control until the very end when character decides to cover him in the fuel and then throw the flare in. And he's made that decision knowing that this creature, this existential being is a ship captain. I don't know anything about manipulation. So he ends up, I'm guessing if anyone's watching this podcast, they've already seen the movie. So hopefully no spoiler warnings.
So with Closed Circuit, it's still isolation, very similar, but the difference is it feels like it's much more about guilt. Is that closer, far off? Because um, the lead character, he's having trouble sleeping. He's,
Yep.
haunted by something. And then when he's in, these are very, or wandering into spoilers. So just as a heads up, when he's in hell, ostensibly, he's visited
Mm.
by a person, and it never explains who that person is. But I just, from my observation watching the film, it felt like it was about some kind of guilt that he was harboring, and that the creature in that film is, in essence, kind of doing the same thing that you do in Outer Reaches, where it is the guilt. It is the guilt of, in Outer Reaches, of him not being there for his family, but in Closed Circuit, it feels like it's the guilt of something that he did. And I wanted to know kind of what your take on that idea is.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you picked up on that. That actually is the idea of the film. So the idea is that that he killed someone from his fatigue, from his tiredness, in his car, and he's plagued with guilt and this trauma. And the beast itself is kind of an internal demon. Some people just kind of don't caught on straight away that the guy in hell is a victim or someone that he'd maybe caused immense amount of pain to before. Um, and even the black dog itself, the black dog in the film represents depression, and in a lot of folk tales, it's a warning to say something wrong is going to happen, be manifested, that then causes him to chase. But again, not going into too many spoilers because the film hasn't quite released online yet, so most people won't be seeing it just yet unless they catch it at a festival. There is a lot of metaphor. It's an ocean, but some people say that it's an allegory for purgatory, and then
Mm.
the hell is another layer. And other people have said it's a waking nightmare, that maybe he fell asleep, and then this whole sequence is a night he can't wake up from the nightmare. And I kind of like that. I like watching it with people in a cinema and people coming out and then like telling me their interpretations, or like yourself, like knowing that there's something that is tormenting this character. Again, that isolation, the loneliness. And I find it's interesting with both these films is that both characters are really hardworking. It's about working for a company. It actually happens to be the same company. This film is set like 200 years prior to Outer Reaches, and the company Vast Horizon, it's like their startup, and they're just getting the money, and the CEO is evil, and so something that you'll notice is I do a lot of like similar storytelling beats and similar like world building. It's like what would happen if the CEO level and made this company that eventually be the ship that flies the crew to in the outer reaches. So they're like it's a prequel, but not a prequel. It's its own film, but it just has the same company that runs it.
It kind of exists within its own universe, very much like Kevin Smith's work, in that sense that these characters,
Yeah, yeah.
they may not like rub shoulders with each other. They exist within the same like stratosphere. Stratosphere is a funny play because of Outer Reaches, but that there's a meaning behind it, and ultimately the meaning is that we're kind of imprisoned by the things that we're meant to do, our employment. It is our dream, it is our aspirations, but it's also our prison. And I don't know if I'm reading more into it than is there, but that's my read.
But I like that because the really fundamental theme for both these films is that it's capitalism that is evil.
No, no, I'm glad that I'm not far from the mark, but I I'm curious, and this is as good of a segue as any, as to if that is a theme you continue in Evil Fred, what you have coming up. What are your plans for the future? Are you looking to, because Evil Fred, I looked on IMDb, it's at 50 minutes, so that's a lot longer of a story than the other two films. Are you working towards feature length, or do you just kind of feel like where the story is the comfortable? Because for example, I write poetry, and when I write, I don't have an idea of when it begins, or I mean when it ends. And so you can write something that's really, really long, and you can write something that's really, really short. But when your instinct tells you that that's the fucking logical place where this is over, is that kind of more your drive in terms of the creative process, in the sense that something could be 10 minutes, something could be 50, something could be 2 hours. It's just about that process when you write and when your instincts tell you that it's done.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting about Evil Fred. It's something a film I shot in 2017 that currently sits on my hard drive. So it's not a project I'm currently working on. Eventually, sometime I'll get an editor to help me fix it and finish it. But I am working on a feature film. So the idea of the shorts is what I wanted to make Out of Reach is to see if I could do it. Like you said earlier, kind of as Molio, using it to sort of get attention. And now that I'm here in America, I'm sort of making contacts and going to the festivals and having that, being able to go, this is my film Outer Reaches. And then I made Closed Circuit, kind of to do the same thing, make a second film, get, a different genre in that horror sphere. And basically the same crew. And they were shot 1 year apart, exactly, which is kind of cool to see. If you watch them back to back, you can kind of see my skill level as a director and as an artist kind of evolving. And so I do have a feature film that I'm working on. It's going to be shot in Thailand in 2026. So I'm kind of talking to so it's a sci-fi action film. I'll give a little bit. I won't tell too much about it, but similar kind of wheelhouse that I've already been in. It's called Dreams. It's about a professor who builds a machine that can record and play back dreams by a Thai hacking syndicate and kidnapped him so that he can. They've stolen his research. They're building a dream theme park that people can hook themselves up to and play back the dreams. And he's been kidnapped so that he can stabilize the machine.
Dude, that sounds fucking great. Is that something you're working with a studio on right now, or is it in what place in the production process are you at?
So I've written a script, talking to finance, trying to get funding for it, which is why I've put the shoot date of 2026, because I don't want to jump ahead. I don't want to, go, I'm going to shoot this next year. I'm going to shoot it in a couple of months. And then just about to start pre-production, getting a producer on board, getting some EPs, investors, and then seeing if we can get a studio to sort of co-produce it with us.
Very cool. So why don't you let people know where they can find you in the world of social media so we can follow this process, because I think that you have a really solid vision, and I think that with the right backing, you can make something really special. I think that both Closed Circuit and Outer Reaches were excellent films visually, and you see that visual storytelling kernel, and expanding on that, I can't wait to see. So by all means, the floor is yours.
You can follow us on Forgotten Astronaut Media, so on both Instagram and Facebook. I have a website. It's forgottenastronaut.media. Sorry, I meant Forgotten Astronaut Productions. You can find me if you want to just follow along with my own journey. 1 page per minute. I ended up getting that domain for everything as well. On Instagram, Forgotten Astronaut Productions. We post every time we have a festival. And if you want, reach out. If you want to tell me your favorite sci-fi movie, I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with anybody who wants to chat to me.
Excellent. And if you guys are here just because of Karl, but you've enjoyed the conversation, first of all, thank you. And secondly, you can find out more about us in a couple of different ways. You can start by liking us on Facebook, facebook.com/CreaturePod, by following us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, YouTube, and Friendster. All at CreaturePod. No, I'm not on Friendster. I don't think that's a thing anymore. But CreaturePod's the way to find us in the world of social media. It's really, really easy. Creature in a Pod. I want to thank you very much, Karl, for all of your time. I'm sorry for the technical snafus that have been prominent. I feel like the demon dog was like nipping at my internet connection the entire time, and just like, you better feel guilty about how you did this. that is gonna do it for us. So for Karl, Redgen, and for myself, again, my name is Chunky. This has been another episode of the Creature Features Podcast. Wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube, listen. Someone you trust.